Somaya Begum was 20 years old. She had just escaped the walls that had kept her silent for years. She had been homeschooled, hidden, controlled, but finally she was studying, laughing, making her own choices. She fought for her freedom and got it. And then, just days later, she vanished. No struggle, no goodbye, just silence. And when they found her, it was too late. Wrapped in a carpet, left to rot beside rubbish. Her killer? Not a stranger, not some monster in the dark. It was someone from her own family. This is not just a murder story. It's about control, about silence, about what happens when honor becomes a weapon. It was 7:15 in the evening on the 6th of July, 2022, when the stillness over Bradford began to feel heavier than usual. Somewhere, a young woman had been missing since late June. For days now, officers from West Yorkshire Police had followed leads that led nowhere, each one colder than the last. The silence around her name was beginning to sound like a farewell. That evening, their search brought them to the edge of a wasteland, a forgotten patch of land beside the street, where people dumped broken furniture, old clothes, and things they didn't want to deal with anymore. The officers combed through the debris with methodical patience, instructed to look for any cracks in the old brick walls. Somewhere among the decay, one officer paused. He had spotted a narrow opening between two bricks, just wide enough to see through. What he saw didn't belong there. A rolled-up carpet tied tightly with string so unnaturally clean it seemed untouched by time or dirt. The buzzing of flies filled the air, agitated and relentless. As the officers stepped closer, a smell rose from the ground and wrapped around them. It was the kind of smell that settled into your clothes, into your bones, a smell no officer ever forgets. The carpet had been weighed down with rotting boxes of food and trash, a hasty attempt to hide something no one was supposed to find. They peeled it back with shaking hands. Inside was the body of a woman, so badly decomposed that her face had become a mystery. But in the pit of their stomachs, they already knew. The search for her was over. And now, the real questions began. Who did this to her? And why? This story takes us back to Bradford, to a quiet corner of the city where a young woman named Somaya Begum was finally beginning to breathe freely. She was only 20 years old, a student of biomedical science at Leeds Beckett University, and by all accounts, she was brilliant, driven, focused. But what most people never saw was how much she had endured just to get that far. Behind her calm presence was a storm she had quietly survived. Somaya had been living under the threat of a forced marriage. Pressure had turned to fear, and fear had turned to danger. When she resisted, she was met with threats of violence. But instead of giving in, she made a decision that few at her age would have had the strength to make. On the 7th of September, 2020, she went to the authorities. A forced marriage protection order was granted, not just for her, but for her siblings as well. That legal protection meant more than safety. It was a turning point. Once the order was in place, Somaya and the other children were removed from the family home. She went to live with her grandmother and her uncle Dud Khan at a modest house on B Street. It wasn't grand, but it gave her something she had never truly known before: independence. There, she could dress how she liked, eat what she chose, visit friends without permission, and watch whatever she pleased on television. For the first time, she could simply be young. She could be herself. One relative later shared that Somaya had been homeschooled for years, isolated and banned from going to university. Her life at B Street was her first taste of freedom. She returned to her studies and to the dreams she had once tucked away. But freedom, for some women, comes at a cost. And for Somaya, that cost was already drawing near. It was the early hours of the 25th of June, 2022. Somaya had just finished a late shift and was caught briefly on a CCTV camera walking home at 4 minutes past midnight. The city slept while she made her way through the quiet streets, unaware that this would be the last image ever captured of her alive. By morning, Bradford stirred awake like any other day. The world continued on. But something, somewhere, had already gone terribly wrong. At 3:35 in the afternoon, Somaya sent a message to one of her closest friends, a simple exchange between two young women used to chatting often. The friend replied just over an hour later, sending Somaya a video of the rain falling outside her window. The message never delivered. At first, she thought little of it. Maybe Somaya's battery had died. Maybe she was busy. But as time passed and the silence lingered, worry began to settle in. By the next day, the unease had grown into fear. The friend reached out to Somaya's family, asking if they had heard from her. That was when she learned the truth. A missing persons report had already been filed. Her uncle Dud, who lived with her, had returned home on the day she disappeared and noticed something off. The front door was unlocked. That wasn't like Somaya. She was always careful. Inside the house, he found his brother Muhammad already there. It was a deeply unsettling moment. Muhammad Tausif Khan had a history that made his presence alarming. He was not supposed to be at the house at all. Violent, unpredictable, and legally barred from entering the property, Muhammad had once threatened his own daughter with a knife, furious that she had spoken to boys. A restraining order from 2016 banned him from visiting his mother or setting foot in the very house he now stood inside. So, why was he there? And where was Somaya? Hours passed. The silence surrounding Somaya grew heavier with each tick of the clock. This was unlike her. Always responsible, always thoughtful. She never left without telling Uncle Dud or her grandmother where she was going and when she'd be back. Now, her phone remained still. Dud called once, then again. Her aunt tried too. Nothing. No ringing, no message, only the static emptiness of unanswered calls. By midnight, panic was rising like water in a sinking room. Dud tried again at 11 minutes past. Still no answer. Her aunt kept trying as well, desperation beginning to show in her voice. Throughout the night and into the next day, the calls continued. At 1:15 p.m., Dud filed a missing persons report with West Yorkshire Police. Officers tried calling her too, but like the others, all they received was silence. Every call went straight to voicemail. They also tried to reach Muhammad Tausif Khan, the uncle who had been at the house the day Somaya vanished, but he, too, wasn't answering. That same day, at 5:44 p.m., a message came through the patrol lines. A high-risk missing person case had been activated. The officers were dispatched to 1 Ampere Cargate Works, a shipping container where 3-year-old Muhammad had been living since the previous November. As they approached, they saw him casually hanging his washing. He smiled and waved as if nothing at all was wrong. Muhammad explained that he had gone to B Street the day before to deliver fruit to his mother. The door was locked, he said, so he called Somaya and asked her to open it. He claimed she was not in the room when he left, but CCTV told a different story. At 1:52 p.m. on the 25th of June, cameras caught Muhammad arriving at the house. Audio from the street revealed shouting. A man's voice barked, "Get out of my face." Then footsteps, then running. A woman's voice cried out, "Lock the door." Days later, his car was seen parked on Mill Lane. He dragged something heavy from the trunk. On the 27th of June, police arrested Muhammad Khan on suspicion of kidnapping. But they were only beginning to uncover what he might have truly done. When officers began questioning Muhammad Khan, he leaned back in his seat and claimed he had a bad memory. Despite the seriousness of the investigation, there was a strange calm about him, as if he were only responding to questions about a lost object. He said that his relationship with Somaya had been generally good. He didn't blink, he didn't flinch. There was something unsettling in the way he spoke, like someone who believed the truth was already too far buried to be uncovered. At 7:30 that same evening, while Muhammad remained in the interview room, other officers arrived at 32 B Street. The house was still. They began photographing every corner, capturing the quiet absence left behind. Later that night, the investigation shifted to 1 Ampere Cargate Works, where Muhammad had been staying. Again, camera shutters echoed in the dim space. The next day, officers returned, determined not to miss a single detail. That was when they noticed something faintly smoldering beside the structure. A bin sat to the side of Muhammad's unit, its contents still giving off heat. Inside, they found what remained of a mobile phone partially burned. It was taken for analysis. The lab results confirmed what many feared. The phone belonged to Somaya. On the 28th of June, just past midnight, he was brought back for questioning at Trafalgar House Police Station. He was asked again about Somaya's disappearance. He gave no answers. When pressed, he simply replied, "I've given my statement, and there's no further comment." That afternoon at 5:07 p.m., they questioned him once more. He insisted he did not know where she was. When asked why he had gone to B Street despite a court order preventing it, he said he had his reasons, but refused to explain. And with every no comment, the space between truth and silence grew colder. The magistrate granted officers 36 more hours to question Muhammad. Yet despite the gravity of what they suspected, he was released under investigation. On the 1st of July, police returned to B Street with a renewed focus. This time, their search revealed bloodstains, one on a red metal table, another beneath the carpet in the living room. Samples were taken and sent to the lab. The results confirmed what they feared. The blood belonged to Somaya. It was now undeniable that something violent had happened inside that home. Investigators began retracing Muhammad's movements from the day she vanished. CCTV showed him having a key cut for the B Street property, a place he was legally banned from entering. At 3:49 p.m. on the 25th of June, he returned. Around that same time, all activity on Somaya's phone suddenly stopped. He had also searched online for large rubble sacks. More footage from his container unit showed him reversing his car toward the entrance. His body blocked the camera, but gloves were visible on his hands. Whatever he was doing back there, he didn't want anyone to see. 11 days had passed since Somaya was first reported missing. What everyone feared had now become reality. Her body was discovered, wrapped tightly in a carpet, abandoned on a patch of open wasteland where it had been left exposed to the summer heat. The sight was devastating. A post-mortem examination revealed a 4-inch metal object embedded in her back, piercing through one of her lungs. According to the pathologist, the injury might not have led to immediate death if medical help had been sought, but untreated, it carried a high risk of infection. Additional signs of harm were present, including possible physical assault before death. No signs of natural causes were detected. However, due to advanced decomposition, especially in the areas around her head and neck, the precise cause of death could not be confirmed. Investigators were convinced she had endured a severe and sustained act of violence. The news stunned the local community. At Leeds Beckett University, where Somaya had been a student, her course leader remembered her as intelligent, hardworking, and highly regarded by both staff and peers. On the 6th of July, at 9:10 p.m., officers returned to Muhammad's residence. This time, they were not just asking questions. He was taken into custody, this time on suspicion of a far more serious offense. It marked the 6th time he had faced police questioning, but now they believed the truth was no longer hidden. On the 7th of July, Muhammad was brought in again. This time, officers laid it bare. A body had been discovered the previous day, one that was badly decomposed. While they were still waiting for confirmation, they were certain it was Somaya. Muhammad showed little emotion. He claimed he had no idea what they were talking about. When asked directly if he had caused her death, he replied with 2 words, "Definitely not." He told them that on the day she disappeared, he had been driving around aimlessly, no destination, just clearing his head. When asked if he had been searching for a place to leave her, he denied it. Why then had he parked near the area where her body was later found? He shrugged, said it was a free country, that he could park where he liked. And the mobile phone? The one found burned beside his home? Just a coincidence, he said. He expressed sadness that a relative could be treated so harshly and added that he didn't see himself as a dangerous person. Quite the opposite. He said most people would describe him as a fantastic man. They asked about the key he had made for the B Street house, the one he was not allowed to enter. He claimed it was for his mother, who had suffered a health scare. He said nothing more. The following day, the 8th of July, at 1:04 p.m., his 7th and final interview began. Police played him footage. He made no comment. They showed him video of himself removing what appeared to be a heavy item from his car. He claimed it was trash, that the area was for dumping waste, and that was all he had done. When asked about the metal object found in Somaya's back, he said he had never seen it. His last words were not of regret, but accusation. He said the police were desperate to pin the blame on someone, to look like they were doing their job, but his silence had already spoken volumes. That day, Muhammad was charged, not questioned, not released, charged with murder. On the 20th of September, Muhammad Tawzif Khan appeared before Bradford Crown Court via video link from HMP Leeds. He was pale, composed, and quiet as the charges were read. When asked to enter his plea, he replied simply, "Not guilty." He denied ending the life of his niece. However, he did admit to interfering with the course of justice. He acknowledged that he had disposed of Somaya's body and attempted to destroy her mobile phone. The courtroom fell quiet, not because of what he admitted, but because of what he refused to accept responsibility for. Presiding over the trial was Mr. Justice Goss. Prosecutor Jason Pitter spoke with unwavering clarity. He told the jury that Somaya had suffered a devastating end in her own home, the very place where she should have felt safest. Her body had been discarded and left exposed to the summer heat until she was no longer recognizable. Muhammad had once claimed he knew nothing about her disappearance. Now, his account had shifted. His legal team said he had only helped to conceal what happened but had not caused it. Muhammad chose not to testify. He gave no statement. The prosecution urged the jury to consider what his silence truly meant. A person wrongly accused might cry out for truth and fairness. But Muhammad remained silent. They proposed this was not just a crime of harm, but one tied to misguided concepts of family reputation. Somaya had turned down a marriage arranged for her abroad. In doing so, she was viewed by some as having brought dishonor to her family, dishonor they believed required consequences. The defense redirected attention to Somaya's father, Yasin. They argued that he, not Muhammad, had the motive, that he was furious when Somaya reported him to the authorities, that he had felt shamed and infuriated. Yasin was not present in court to respond. Months earlier, he had separated from his wife and quietly left for Pakistan on a one-way ticket. The defense portrayed him as strict and emotionally harsh, but the prosecution brought the jury back to what was certain. Muhammad had duplicated the key. He had entered the house. He appeared on CCTV. And after that moment, Somaya was never heard from again. The timeline by now had narrowed sharply. Investigators concluded that something irreversible had likely happened around the moment Muhammad arrived at the house on the 25th of June. From that point on, there was no further contact from Somaya. No calls, no messages, nothing. Her voice disappeared from the world. And it was in that silence that the weight of suspicion hardened into something more. In court, a detective constable recalled sitting across from Muhammad during an earlier interview on the 29th of June. What stood out wasn't just what Muhammad said, it was what he asked. He wanted to know the sentence for someone in his situation. The officer explained that taking a life could carry a life sentence. Then Muhammad asked about a lesser charge. He asked if it was true that you only serve half your sentence. The room chilled. These were not the questions of an innocent man grasping for truth. They were the questions of someone already calculating consequences. The trial lasted 10 days. The jury deliberated for 9.5 hours over 3 long days. When they returned, their verdict was clear. They rejected the claim that Muhammad had merely handled the aftermath. They did not believe he was just a witness to what happened. They believed he was the one responsible. And with that, Muhammad Tawzif Khan was found guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 25 years. An additional 5 years were added for obstructing justice, to be served concurrently. From the public gallery, quiet cries could be heard as the verdict was read. On camera, Muhammad had tried to conceal the truth. In court, it was fully exposed. Security footage showed Muhammad Tawzif Khan near his shipping container in Bradford, where he had hidden Somaya's body for the night. The container, no more than 30 feet long, had become her final holding place. In the early hours, he transferred her from that narrow metal space into his car, Not with reverence, not with care, but with the same calculated indifference he had shown throughout. He drove her to a patch of wasteland, one littered with trash and discarded furniture, and there he left her, a 20-year-old student, radiant with potential, left among rubbish. In court, Mr. Justice Goss did not mask his words. He said there was no clear motive to be identified. Whether it was rooted in twisted notions of family shame or a warped sense of punishment, it remained speculation. What mattered was the act, deliberate, sustained, and cruel. The jury had found Muhammad guilty beyond doubt. The judge emphasized how the way Somaya was disposed of was among the most disturbing elements of the case. It was not just murder, it was the erasure of her dignity. When sentencing was passed, Muhammad was told that he would likely die behind bars. Life imprisonment with a minimum term of 25 years. He would be 72 before he could even request parole. The courtroom, tense and silent, absorbed the weight of those years. For the officers who had followed every grim step of the investigation, there was a fragile sense of resolution. Detective Superintendent Mark Bowes later said that justice had been served, but that justice, in this case, could never truly be enough. Somaya had stood up. She had dared to say no to the life others tried to script for her. She fought for freedom, for education, for the right to live without fear. Her father, furious at her defiance, was already gone, having boarded a one-way flight to Pakistan shortly after severing ties with her mother. And though some might have labeled this an honor killing, the court refused to give that narrative power. The judge rejected the term. There is no honor in control, no pride in silencing a daughter's voice. Only brutality, only loss, and a life stolen far too soon. In the aftermath of the verdict, a charity dedicated to supporting victims of honor-based violence voiced its disappointment. Though Muhammad received a life sentence, advocates argued that the court had failed to fully recognize the role of forced marriage as a contributing factor. They believed the motive made Somaya even more vulnerable, and that should have been reflected in the sentence. More importantly, they urged statutory agencies, those who had interacted with Somaya before her death, to reflect deeply, to recognize the missed signals, to do better next time. Somaya had been brave before. She had taken the unimaginable step of standing up to threats from within her own family. She went to the authorities, trusted the system, and fought for her right to live freely. And yet, even after taking all the right steps, her life was stolen by someone who should have protected her. Outside the courtroom, Fatima Patel, a close family friend, stood among reporters and grieving relatives. She said the family was still shattered, still struggling to comprehend. But at least now, there was a measure of closure, a place to start healing. Following the sentencing, there were calls to challenge it, to increase the minimum term served. Some argued it was too lenient for such a brutal crime, but the Attorney General disagreed. The sentence would stand, and so would the sorrow. In the days that followed, an outpouring of grief swept through the community. Flowers appeared outside Somaya's home. Cards, candles, quiet tributes. A local counselor spoke of a neighborhood left shaken. Neighbors said that Dud, the uncle who had reported her missing, had been so traumatized he couldn't bear to return to the house. Somaya Begum was 20 years old. She had only just tasted freedom, only just begun to dream on her own terms. Her courage had already changed lives, and even in death, her story would echo beyond the courtrooms. Afri Kasim, the founder of a charity working to end honor-based abuse, reminded everyone that this was not about culture or tradition. It was about control, about power, about the urgent need to protect young women like Somaya. And for those still at risk, her name would not be forgotten. Somaya Begum wanted something incredibly simple: to live freely, to study, to shape her own future. But in the eyes of those who believed family honor outweighed a woman's autonomy, that desire was treated like defiance. She took a stand, said no, and trusted that the system would protect her. Instead, she was murdered in the very place she should have been safest, by someone meant to be family. Her story is not just a tragedy, it's a warning. A reflection of how far we still have to go when a young woman can be killed simply for choosing freedom. We cannot bring Somaya back, but we can choose what we do with her story. Share this video if you believe no culture, no tradition, and no name should ever justify violence. Talk about this. Teach the next generation that control is not love and silence is not peace. Support the organizations fighting against forced marriage and honor-based abuse. And if you or someone you know is facing the same fear Somaya once did, please do not stay quiet. A single voice can still be heard. And sometimes that voice is enough to save a life,